The silence of Mustafar after Padme's death did not bring peace to Vader. On the contrary, every moment he remembered her last look fed a deep resentment, not only against himself but against the Emperor. In his mind, Palpatine had orchestrated every step that led to this tragedy. If I hadn't followed that man, she would still be alive, he thought, as anger mingled with grief. Over the years, this feeling did not fade. Instead, it grew into a constant, relentless flame burning within him, guiding him toward a new goal: to overthrow the master who had shaped and enslaved him. Vader knew that to face Palpatine, he would need to overcome the limitations imposed by his mutilated body and current suit. The wounds of Mustafar, the damaged lungs, the restricted mobility, all of it made him more dependent on the Force but also more vulnerable. I need something that will free me and make me even stronger, he murmured to himself as he studied old records of forbidden technologies from the Republic era and civilizations even the Empire dared not mention. It was in these studies that the first idea emerged: to create a suit that would not be a prison but an extension of his own body. In absolute secrecy, Vader began selecting scientists, engineers, and masters of biotechnology scattered across the galaxy. Each choice was calculated. All had to be loyal only to him, even if out of fear. He gathered them in a hidden complex on an isolated asteroid, far from the Emperor's eyes. There, he presented his vision: a system that would merge with his body, interacting directly with his midichlorians, enhancing them, healing his wounds, and restoring his lost breath. You will not just fix a man, he declared. You will create the most powerful being this galaxy has ever seen. The following months were filled with intense and silent work. Under Vader's constant supervision, the scientists developed a prototype that fused with his DNA as if it had been part of his body since birth. Artificial tissues reinforced with cortosis fibers protected against lightsaber attacks, while regenerative nanostructures slowly repaired his atrophied lungs and muscles. Over time, Vader realized he was breathing better, and the need for the respirator began to fade. The idea of walking and fighting without the mechanical sound that had haunted him since Mustafar rekindled something he thought was dead: the feeling of freedom. The new suit was not just healing, it was amplification. His reflexes were refined, his physical strength increased to superhuman levels, and, most surprisingly, his connection to the Force intensified like never before. Vader could now channel Force lightning without suffering the damage that had once limited such power. He could absorb attacks, redirect them, and overwhelm opponents in seconds. Every training session, every combat simulation made it clear that the time when the Emperor could dominate him was coming to an end. I will no longer be the apprentice, but the ruler, he told himself, concluding an exercise where he had destroyed 10 training droids with a single attack. To maintain secrecy, Vader crafted false narratives to justify his absences from the Imperial Power Center. Officially, he was inspecting rebel systems or overseeing the construction of new weapons. In practice, he always returned to the asteroid, refining every detail of the suit with the scientists. The joints moved like natural muscles. The armor felt as light as ordinary clothing, yet it withstood explosions and blaster impacts as if impenetrable. It was the body he had always wanted since Mustafar, not the fragile body of Anakin, nor the mechanical prison of Vader, but the fusion of both with the power of the Chosen One. As the relationship between his midichlorians and the suit evolved, so did his mental refinement. Vader began experiencing more intense premonitory visions, locating specific beings in the galaxy with terrifying precision. Palpatine did not perceive the growing threat, as Vader masked his presence in the Force with a skill he had not possessed before. When the time comes, he will not see, he planned, visualizing the encounter where he would invert the master-apprentice relationship. His determination was cold and calculated, devoid of the impulsive rage that had once dominated him on Mustafar. The loyalty of the scientists was ensured by a mix of reward and fear. Vader promised them wealth, power, and protection, but any sign of betrayal was met with lethal demonstrations. Yet, a few were fascinated by the magnitude of the project. Creating something that blended biotechnology, Sith alchemy, and the Force was an unprecedented feat. "We are not just building armor," said one of the team leaders. We are witnessing the rise of a new being. Vader, upon hearing this, responded with a slight nod. He did not need flattery. He needed results. The suit underwent extreme tests. Vader faced electrical storms, fought multiple opponents, and even exposed himself to the vacuum of space for a few seconds to verify the life support system's resilience. Everything worked flawlessly. He not only survived but dominated every scenario, shaping the environment to his advantage. What would once have been a fatal risk now became just another opportunity to prove his superiority. One day, after an especially intense training session, Vader walked to an isolated chamber and looked at his reflection in the new helmet's black visor. For the first time, he did not see only the terrifying figure the Empire knew, but something more. Something close to what Anakin Skywalker might have been had he reached his full potential. There was no more pain, only power. The destiny awaiting him was clear, and it no longer included Palpatine's throne as something distant. He was ready to take it. The plan to dethrone the Emperor was meticulously crafted. Vader knew he could not simply attack him in front of everyone. He needed a moment where they could measure their strength without interference. He began manipulating schedules, drawing Palpatine's attention to distant matters until he created the perfect opportunity. There was no room for error. Each step brought him closer to the inevitable confrontation, and the certainty grew within him. When that day came, the outcome would already be written. At the end of the preparations, Vader returned to the asteroid to personally inspect the final version of the suit. The scientists waited in silence, aware that this moment would define not only Vader's future, but possibly the fate of the galaxy. Wearing the armor and feeling it as part of himself, Vader breathed without the aid of machines for the first time in years. He looked at those present and declared, his voice deep and steady, "The Emperor's reign is over. Mine begins now." Vader requested a private audience with the Emperor under the pretext of presenting strategic reports from outer sectors. The throne room was silent, illuminated by blades of light projected onto the polished floor. Palpatine watched him approach with an almost clinical interest, like someone dissecting a rare creature. "I see you have been frequently absent, Lord Vader," he remarked, hiding venom in a soft voice. "Long missions? Investigations? Or something else?" Vader tilted his head slightly, calculating every gesture to reveal nothing before the right moment. "Results, my master. That is all that matters." Palpatine circled the throne, hands hidden in his sleeves, sniffing the Force like an old and dangerous animal. "Your flow has changed," he said, almost whispering. "Less pain, less noise, more control." His yellow gaze narrowed. "Remove your helmet." Vader remained still for a second, then took a step forward without obeying. "It is unnecessary, my master." The Emperor stopped and raised his chin. "Kneel, then." The response came without hesitation, firm as a verdict. "Not today." The silence was broken by a metallic hiss as two royal guards emerged from the side columns. Palpatine did not attack, he tested first. "Prove to me you are still worthy of what I achieved for you." The guards advanced in sync, targeting his joints and legs. Vader did not draw his saber. He opened his hand, deflected the lasers with a minimal gesture, and knocked them down using the weapon's own energy against them, slowing them mid-air as if time had thickened. "Elegant tricks," the Emperor remarked, smirking. "But obedience remains the only currency that matters." "Obedience is your language, not mine," Vader replied, stepping closer to the throne's dais. "You chained me to pain and called it power." Palpatine leaned forward, dropping the mask of benevolence. "Then show me what you have learned without me." Only then did his fingers open, and Force lightning snaked through the hall, not as an impulsive attack but as a measured and relentless test. The discharges struck the new suit's chest plate, absorbed and redirected by internal meshes that glowed briefly before fading. Vader remained standing. "The time for tests is over." The Emperor intensified the storm, turning it into a continuous arc while whispering ancient incantations under his breath. Vader raised his hands and pulled the energy toward himself, as if gathering a laden net, compressing it until the room vibrated. With a circular motion, He redirected part of the flow, not to mortally wound but to unbalance his opponent and expose his stance. Palpatine staggered a step and bared his teeth. Arrogance, so typical of Skywalker. "You made me this?" Vader retorted, and the chamber trembled. The exchange then ceased to be spectacle and became chess. Palpatine plunged into the apprentice's mind with mental strikes, trying to rekindle ghosts. Mustafar, the burning cradle, the scream in the sand. Vader breathed on his own, free from the weight of the old mechanisms, and closed the internal doors of his spirit. He launched a telekinetic wave that tore plates from the floor and stacked them like a moving wall, forcing the Emperor to shift his line of attack. When Palpatine leaped to reposition, Vader was already behind him, locking his arms with a containment ring that snapped into place as if it had always been waiting there. The shackles were not ordinary. They were forged to feed on attempts to break free. Every pulse of lightning Palpatine emitted was digested by the circuit and returned as stiffness in his joints. "You taught me to turn pain into strength," Vader said, pushing him onto a lower platform that opened with a hiss. "Now you will learn the cost." They descended to a hidden level, where a medical chamber and containment runes as cold as ancient steel awaited. "You will live. You will remain Emperor, but the throne is no longer yours." When Vader returned to the throne room, the news spread through the corridors before he even sat down. Moffs and admirals lined up in holograms, assessing the new reality with guarded eyes. "Questions?" he said, his voice amplified by the mask he now wore by choice. No one spoke. "Then get to work." In public, the mechanical sound would return as a calculated myth. In private, his partially regenerated face stared at mirrors in silence, remembering that the man was not dead, only redesigned. The symbol was still necessary and the legend useful. With the Empire subdued, Vader expanded his senses beyond trade routes and war maps. In long meditations, the Force opened like a nocturnal sea, and from it emerged a name that tore through the past. Skywalker. The trail led him to Tatooine, to the dust where all hope and all fall had begun. He went without escort, crossing the desert like an ancient shadow. He observed the simple house, heard light footsteps in the courtyard, and a young voice. He knew in the next instant. "How dare they hide this from me?" he said as he entered, and the wind seemed to bend. Owen and Beru recoiled, petrified. Luke lifted his chin with the raw courage of those who still believe in simple choices. "I don't serve the Empire," he shot, fists clenched. "And I owe you nothing." Vader did not raise his hand. "You owe me the truth they took from us." The air grew dense as an old acquaintance stepped outside, saber in hand. "Leave Vader," said Obi-Wan, making the shadow a shelter. "Let him be. Do not lie to him, old master," Vader replied, and a gesture pinned him against the wall without harm. "Today, only the truth." Luke turned to Kenobi, eyes blazing. "Is it true?" Obi-Wan's silence lasted just long enough to hurt. "It is. He is Anakin Skywalker, and he is your father." Vader did not celebrate or ask for forgiveness. He offered a choice. "Come with me. I will be your master. They will live." Luke accepted but did not surrender. He kept the promise where one keeps glowing iron, close to the heart, where it burns and forges. Obi-Wan watched the ship take off and then departed, heading to Dagobah, to seek in the swamp the wisdom that sometimes only grows where everything seems still. In parallel, Yoda and Obi-Wan met with Bail Organa in a private gathering, far from any Imperial ears. The conversation revolved around a bold plan, to tell Leia the whole truth and propose that she infiltrate alongside Luke to try and bring Vader back to the light. "Too risky. This is," said Yoda, his voice grave and slow, "but possible it may be." Obi-Wan looked at Bail and added, "She deserves to choose. Destiny cannot be decided without her voice." Bail initially resisted. The weight of responsibility over Leia was immense, and the idea of placing her so close to Vader seemed unacceptable. "I cannot allow her to become a pawn in this game," he said, crossing his arms firmly. Yet, as he heard the arguments of the two masters, He began to realize that denying her the truth would be more dangerous than revealing it. Finally, he sighed and declared, "The decision will be hers." Leia was called and received all the revelations directly, without half-truths. She heard about Vader, Luke, and the blood bond that united the three. The tension in the air did not shake her. She remained firm, absorbing every detail as if arming herself for battle. When silence fell, she looked at the three and said, without hesitation, "I will help. If there is a way to bring him back, I will find it." Vader trained Luke as heir and instrument, offering him power, discipline, and a dark mirror of himself. Luke learned with the ferocity of one running at the edge of a cliff, experimenting with techniques few would dare name. But he kept hidden, a quiet flame that did not feed on hatred. "Your progress is unusual," Vader commented, testing him with impossible sequences. "I learn fast," Luke replied, thinking of what he would do with it all when the time came. Elsewhere in the galaxy, Leia prepared the next move, not to destroy but to bring back. "Together, we will be the bridge," she told herself before setting out for the next play. Time later, the revelation about Leia changed the silent configuration of the game. Bail Organa, though reluctant, opened Alderaan's doors to receive Vader and Luke under the pretext of discussing strategic alliances. Leia, prepared and determined, waited in the grand hall. When her eyes met Vader's, the Force whispered the truth to all present. Luke felt the immediate impact, as if a lost link had closed in that instant. Vader said no word. He only observed, letting the weight of the revelation settle on its own. Bail broke the silence by explaining the history, the separation after birth, the need to protect both from the Emperor. "She is your daughter, Lord Vader," he said, controlling every syllable. Luke looked at his sister with a mix of surprise and relief, while Vader only took a deep breath under the mask, absorbing the truth. "Two halves, finally reunited," he murmured. Leia, however, did not indulge in sentimentality. "And now, will we pretend there is no blood and fire between us?" The question echoed in the hall like a direct challenge. In the following days, Leia began living alongside Luke under Vader's close tutelage. The new dynamic brought nightly conversations between the twins, far from their father's attentive ears. Luke revealed that he was training to one day change the Empire from within. Leia, in turn, admitted that she had accepted the proximity as an opportunity to achieve something greater, to bring Vader back to the light. "He is not just the monster everyone sees," she said, "but the bridge must be built from the inside out." Luke agreed, though he knew the road would be long. Vader, aware that something was happening between them, did not prevent their meetings, observing from afar. He noticed there was more harmony than tension between the two, and this stirred conflicting feelings. On one hand, he was proud to see his lineage united. On the other, he feared this union might threaten his authority. Still, he did not intervene. On rare occasions, he allowed himself to speak of Padme, describing her as a woman of incomparable strength. Leia listened in silence, recognizing fragments of herself in the stories. Over time, Luke and Leia began acting discreetly to test the limits of their influence over their father. On joint missions, they avoided unnecessary confrontations, freed prisoners, and protected civilians, disguising such acts as strategic decisions. Vader noticed and, though he did not explicitly approve, he did not punish. It was as if he were observing an experiment whose outcome intrigued him. "You act as if mercy were a weapon," he remarked once. "Sometimes it is," Leia replied, without lowering her eyes. The emotional bond grew and, little by little, eroded Vader's internal barriers. He began questioning some of his orders, even delaying operations he would have once executed without hesitation. Palpatine, kept in the underground chamber, became almost irrelevant in the Empire's daily governance. His voice, when occasionally heard, carried venom and disdain, but Vader did not let it reach his children. "The past has no dominion here," he said, shutting down any attempt by the old master to interfere. The turning point came during an inspection of a garrison. An officer disobeyed direct orders and attempted to execute hostages. Luke intervened openly, and Leia stood by his side. Vader arrived shortly after, saber in hand, ready to enforce discipline. Seeing his children together, protecting innocence, he hesitated. "Is this weakness?" he asked, more to himself than to them. Leia answered firmly, "It is the strength you forgot." Those words echoed in his mind for days. Soon after, Vader decided it was time to test Luke's loyalty. He took him to the chamber where Palpatine was imprisoned and ordered him to execute the Emperor. "Do it," he said in a low voice, echoing memories of other times. Luke looked at the weakened Emperor and then at his father. "No," he replied, firm. Vader insisted, stepping closer, but Luke remained unmoved. The air grew tense, and for a moment the sound of Vader's mask seemed louder than everything. Vader ignited his saber and advanced, and the clash of blades resonated through the chamber. The fight was intense, a battle not just physical but ideological. Luke used defense as a moral shield, avoiding lethal strikes. Vader, increasingly pressured, began recognizing the familiarity of Luke's murmured words, distant memories of Padme on Mustafar, begging him to turn back. This invisible connection began weakening his resolve. Then Leia entered the chamber, unarmed, her voice steady and resolute. "There is still good in you, Anakin. I can feel it." Vader stood still for a moment, his ignited saber trembling in his hand. Leia stepped closer, meeting his gaze without fear, and added, "Can't you see this is a path Luke cannot follow?" The words echoed within him like a distant call, reminding him of Mustafar, when Padme, tears in her eyes, had said almost the same thing, pleading for him to stop before it was too late. The memory struck Vader with force, piercing years of hatred and pain. He looked at Luke, then at Leia, and Padme's voice merged with his daughter's, as if mother and child spoke together in the same instant. The tension in his muscles eased, and slowly he deactivated his saber. He turned to Palpatine, who watched him with a mix of hatred and surprise. "Return to your prison," he ordered coldly. Without another word, he turned his back, and that gesture became his first public act of refusal of the dark path since Mustafar. From that day on, Leia and Luke intensified their conversations with Vader. These were not superficial dialogues but long exchanges filled with memories, reflections, and subtle provocations meant to rekindle the spark of Anakin Skywalker within him. Each encounter was a silent battle where light and shadow clashed not with sabers but with words. Gradually, Vader listened more than he spoke, as if something inside him began accepting that the past could still be rewritten. Over time, the resistance that kept him bound to the Imperial throne dissolved. Luke and Leia worked in perfect sync, always respecting the limits of how far they could go in each conversation. They did not demand immediate change but planted ideas and memories that took root in silence. Vader, once relentless, began pondering before issuing orders, even questioning whether the empire he had built was truly the destiny he desired for the galaxy. It was Leia who took the decisive step. During a private meeting, she spoke of the possibility of using political and military power constructively without oppression. "You can be more than the feared emperor," she said, looking directly at him. Luke added, "You can be the man our mother believed you were." These words, simple and direct, echoed in Vader's heart with a force he could not deny. Days later, Vader summoned Luke and Leia for a definitive conversation. There were no guards or formalities, just father and children, equals. He admitted that their constant talks had changed his perspective. "Perhaps I was wrong to believe absolute power was the only solution," he confessed. Leia and Luke realized this moment was rare and dangerous. Vader was vulnerable yet ready to decide. Guided by his children's influence, Vader approached the Imperial Senate. Under the pretext that a new political arrangement was needed to ensure stability, he proposed an agreement. He would leave the throne and cease military campaigns, provided he could live in peace. The request was not met without resistance, but the presence of Luke and Leia at his side convinced many that this change could be real. The agreement was sealed. Vader renounced the title of Emperor and retreated to Naboo, choosing to live in the very place where he had once spent moments with Padme. The house, surrounded by gardens and lakes, became a silent refuge. There, he was neither Vader nor fully Anakin, just a man trying to understand who he truly was, free from the weight of war and politics. Leia and Luke continued visiting him frequently. During these visits, they spoke of rebuilding the galaxy, of the life they might have had if past choices had been different. Vader listened more than he spoke, absorbing every account, every idea about what it meant to live in peace. Gradually, that house on Naboo became a meeting point for important decisions about the future. Over time, the new Jedi Order began to take shape. Under Luke's leadership, and with guidance from Obi-Wan and Yoda, Force-sensitive youths were trained to balance power and compassion. Leia also participated, not as a Jedi but as a political mediator, ensuring the new generation had the Senate's support. Vader watched from afar, proud, knowing that, in some way, he had contributed to making that future possible.